final resting place of ancient Egyptian Queen Nefertiti could finally have been discovered. British archaeologist says radar scanning suggests her remains could be hidden inside King Tutankhamun's burial chamber, right inside the Valley of the Kings.
The most famous sculpture in ancient Egyptian history has a second face hidden underneath it. The bust of Queen Nefertiti, the centerpiece of the Neues Museum in Berlin, photographed and worshipped by tourists for over 100 years, is not actually a single sculpture. It is two, a skin of stucco between 1 and 2 millimeters thick, painted to flawless smoothness, has been layered over a limestone core. And in 2007, a German radiologist named Dr. Alexander Huppertz pushed the bust through a hospital-grade CT scanner and X-rayed his way down through the plaster. What he found, carved into the limestone underneath, was a second face, a different face, slightly asymmetrical, a clear bump on the nose, faint creases at the corners of the mouth, a subtle softness around the eyes. The sculptor of the most famous queen in ancient Egypt carved a real human being. Then someone covered her up and built an idealized version on top. Huppertz published his findings in the journal Radiology in March 2009. They have never been seriously challenged. The story of why she has two faces is the story of the most violent dynastic erasure in Egyptian history. The murders, the missing daughters, the slow poisoning of an entire royal family by the very pigments on their own temple walls. The bust was unearthed in 1912 at Tel El Amarna, the ruins of a city that should not have existed. A team led by German archaeologist Ludwig Borchardt broke into the workshop of a sculptor named Thutmose and found her lying on her side in the rubble, undisturbed for over 3,000 years. To understand why she was there, you have to understand what her husband had just done to Egypt. Around 1350 before the Common Era, the pharaoh Akhenaten launched the most radical religious revolution in 3,000 years of Egyptian history. He shut down the temples of the old gods. He stripped the priesthoods of their lands and authority. He declared there was only one god worthy of worship, the Aten, the visible disk of the sun, and that he and Nefertiti were the only two human beings on earth permitted to speak to it. He moved the capital out into the desert and built a new city from scratch. While Egypt's empire crumbled, the Amarna letters show foreign allies begging for help that never came. Nefertiti was not a quiet queen. Reliefs from the period show her alone, in royal regalia, raising a war club over kneeling enemies, a pose previously reserved for pharaohs themselves. No Egyptian queen had ever been depicted that way. These images reflect the revolutionary Amarna art style, with its distinctive elongated features and unprecedented naturalism. This is why the bust has two faces. The smooth, ageless, perfectly balanced face was exactly the image a fragile new regime needed to project to a population just told to abandon every god they had ever known. The face underneath was the version the sculptor had actually seen. Found in a workshop with no inscription and no royal cartouche, almost certainly a master template, the bust was not a private memento. It was a tool of state propaganda. Akhenaten and Nefertiti had 6 daughters, but the story of the royal collapse hinges on just a few of them. Around year 14 of the reign, the second daughter, Meketaten, dies. There is a wall scene preserved in the royal tomb at Amarna that shows her parents grieving over her body. Akhenaten and Nefertiti are bent toward her, openly mourning, one of the only intimate emotional images from the entire ancient world. Here is the detail nobody can fully explain. Standing right next to the grieving parents in the same scene is a nurse holding a newborn infant. There is no inscription naming that baby. There is no record of the child anywhere else in the Egyptian record. A speculative reading, advanced by Egyptologist Aidan Dodson, is that Meketaten died in childbirth, possibly from a pregnancy involving a close relative pairing within the royal family. The Egyptian dynasties practiced sibling marriage to preserve what they believed was a divine bloodline. The reading is not universally accepted, but it is also the only reading that makes the infant in the scene make sense. Around the 12th year of the reign, Nefertiti vanishes from the Egyptian record. No funeral, no identified tomb. The archaeology disagrees with the idea that she died quietly. Across multiple monuments, researchers have identified a pattern of deliberate erasure. Her name was chiseled out of stone, systematically, by hands that knew what they were doing, and in the same window, a new name begins appearing in royal inscriptions, Nefertiti, a pharaoh who ruled briefly between Akhenaten's death and the rise of Tutankhamun. Some scholars argue this ruler was actually Smenkhkare, Akhenaten's mysterious co-regent, while others believe Smenkhkare and Nefertiti were two different people entirely. The grammatical markers attached to Nefertiti's royal titles are feminine, the pronouns, the verb, endings. James Allen of Brown University, working alongside Marc Gaboldi of the University of Montpellier, has built an increasingly accepted case that Nefertiti and Nefertiti are the same person, that after her husband's death, Nefertiti took the throne herself under a new name and ruled Egypt in her own right. Other scholars argue Nefertiti was Meritaten, the eldest daughter. The identification is contested. What is not contested is what happened next. When Howard Carter opened Tutankhamun's intact tomb in 1922, the world saw the gold mask, the throne, the chariots. What the world did not see at first is that many of those treasures bore visible signs of hasty modification. Original inscriptions had been physically scraped off and re-engraved. Feminine grammatical markers had been overwritten with masculine ones. A significant fraction of Tutankhamun's burial goods were not originally made for him. They were made for a previous female ruler and reassigned for the boy king after a sudden dynastic transition. If Allen and Gaboldi are right, Tutankhamun was buried wearing his stepmother's jewelry. In 2010, Zahi Hawass and Dr. Sahar Salim of Cairo University published a multi-year DNA and CT study of the late 18th dynasty mummies in the Journal of the American Medical Association. The findings rewrote the family. Tutankhamun's biological mother is the mummy known as the Younger Lady, found in Tomb Kfi 35. She is the daughter of Amenhotep III and Queen Tia. She is the full sister of Akhenaten. Nefertiti was not, which means Nefertiti is not Tutankhamun's biological mother. She was his stepmother. Salim then turned her CT scanner on the Younger Lady herself. The scans revealed severe trauma to the left side of her face, a shattered jaw, a fractured cheekbone, the fragments missing entirely, as if cleaned away by embalmers. The injury was inflicted at or very near the time of death. Salim's published interpretation is that the wound was caused by a heavy object swung with force. The skull fractures show sharp inward edges, not the rounded breaks of slow pressure from collapsing debris. Whoever she was killed, and the embalmers cleaned the wound before they wrapped her. Hawass continues to argue that another mummy, the one labeled KV21b, is the most plausible candidate for Nefertiti herself. The DNA recovered is incomplete. The mummy is in poor condition. The identification, as Hawass himself acknowledges, is hypothesis, not proven fact. The DNA study found something else. Generation after generation of close-kin marriages across the 18th dynasty. Royal Egyptians married within their immediate family because they believed they were preserving a divine bloodline. The biological consequences were severe. Tutankhamun is the textbook case. His body shows a club foot, a partially collapsed arch in the other foot. Evidence of repeated bone disease. The walking sticks found in his tomb were not ceremonial. He needed them. He died at around 18 or 19. Tissue analyses of mummies from the Amarna period have shown unusually elevated levels of mercury, arsenic, and lead. These metals were components of the mineral pigments used extensively in the painted temples and palaces of the Aten cult. Long-term exposure damages the nervous system, weakens immune response, and degrades bone density. The dazzling, sun-drenched temple complex Akhenaten and Nefertiti built around themselves may have been slowly poisoning the royal family that lived inside it. The causal claim is contested. The elevated metal levels are not. The third daughter, Ankhesenaten, resurfaced after the Amarna collapse under a new name, Ankhesenamun, and was married to her half-brother Tutankhamun. They were children. He died young and childless. Then she did something unprecedented. She wrote a letter to the king of the Hittites, begging him to send one of his sons to marry her. As she put it, she would not lower herself to marry a servant. The Hittite prince, Zananza, was dispatched. He was murdered en route to Egypt. Ankhesenamun then disappears from the historical record entirely. No tomb, no identified mummy. The other 4 daughters leave almost no trace. The gaps are too clean to be random decay. When the general Horemheb seized power a generation later, he launched a deliberate campaign to wipe the Amarna period from Egyptian memory. He chiseled their names off temple walls. Without identified tombs, without funerary cults, without recognized descendants, the line ceased to exist in the legal and religious framework of the kingdom. In 2015, British Egyptologist Nicholas Reeves announced he believed he had found the outlines of 2 sealed doorways in Tutankhamun's burial chamber, hidden behind painted plaster. His hypothesis was that the tomb was originally cut for someone else, almost certainly Nefertiti, and when the boy king died unexpectedly, the workers walled off the original chambers and squeezed him into what was effectively the antechamber. A Japanese radar team in 2016 reported anomalies consistent with hidden voids. An Italian team in 2018 ran more careful scans and concluded the signals were natural variations in the bedrock. The Egyptian Ministry of Antiquities has declined every request to physically test the wall. Reeves has not withdrawn his hypothesis. He believes she is still on the other side of the painted plaster, in the most famous tomb in the world, in silence. The most powerful queen of the 18th dynasty has no confirmed tomb, no confirmed mummy, no confirmed name on the most famous sculpture ever made of her. Her successor was a teenage boy who wore her jewelry, and the only reason any image of her survived is that the people who erased her did not look in a sculptor's workshop in an abandoned city in the desert. 3,000 years after the campaign began, even the face is hiding what they took.